Boom. We are live, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for joining us on this wonderful Friday morning. Bitcoin peaked up and touched around $45,000 today before turning back around. That's exciting. And we actually see a lot of strength and momentum in many sectors here as well. Madonna bought a Bored Ape. We're going to pontificate about the Bored Apes at the end of the episode, alongside some of the questions from the Private Bear Den. But to start, what we're going to do is just take a look at Bitcoin pretty simply here. This is what I believe to be an accumulation channel. So I don't think we're going to go too much lower. I think we actually probably have put in the bottom. There's a lot of reasons to believe that just because of how much strength in accumulation is going on here, that was probably the bottom. Now, again, something could come along and scare the humans into irrationally selling for prices as low as $14,000. But we'd need a pretty big irrationally fearful moment. I'm not sure what would cause that. You could think of a few things. There's always a few black swans we could think about. But barring that, I believe we're actually probably put in the bottom. And we had compared this last time to, if you remember, the S&P 500. Now, the S&P 500 is on the chart here in blue. And as you can see, it came down. This is an old chart that we had saved. And as you can see, Bitcoin actually hadn't put in three more retests of this area yet. So you can see here that Bitcoin has gone up quite significantly since then. So here we are. Right, we've actually continually put in higher lows, effectively, at least on this area chart. Whereas here, when we were making this original conjecture against the S&P 500, we hadn't even put in that low yet. I suspect that this is a very strong reaccumulation pattern. Bitcoin, in my mind, is a crisis asset. It is a value asset during crisis. The original kind of what popped it into my radar was the Sapritic collapse of their banking system when their government just started taking money from citizens. Anyone that had over $100,000 just like wiped your account out, basically. And that awoke my interest to what it is and why banks can do whatever it is that they want. And then the value add of something like Bitcoin, which is fundamentally non-reliant upon the system. And what we're relying on is the technology, mathematics, in a trustless nature, at least with the technology, so that we can have a peer-to-peer transaction. That way, if you and I agree that we would like to do something, we are allowed to do so by volunteer. So there's a huge value add. Again, I think that crisis investing is also difficult because in the moment of crisis, all asset evaluations start to go a little haywire. We saw this or in the beginning of this month here with things like wheat. We'll just take a quick look at the wheat chart just to check in where we're at. So wheat had stayed at relatively the same price for a bunch of years, and then we had this big explosion in price. Now, this is never a good thing, and it's not isolated either. So we have here's the oil index, the energy index as well. We had nickel did some insanity. It's come back down quite a bit since then. But even still, when things start to go wrong, these are the indicators that we look for. We look for chaos in the markets. And when things like when oil went below zero in the beginning of the pandemic, that was one of those things where who would have predicted oil could go below the cost of itself based off storage and all these abstractions and the way the market anticipates prices through futures, etc. So we know that during crisis, things start to go a little haywire. And although the price of Bitcoin may appear to be at low as, let's say, $14,000, it'll be very difficult to acquire any of it. If it were to happen, it would be almost instantaneous, I would bet. There's so much capital on the sidelines waiting to accumulate. So we're going to roll over just kind of the general sentiment, starting with the VIX. We've returned almost to baseline again, but for the last 2 years, we've been at an excited rate of fear. So lots of irrationality in the markets as well. We were keeping a close eye on the S&P 500, and I thought that this was kind of a fun way to explain the mentality of buying and selling. So here's the start of the pandemic, and here's the effective end of the pandemic at January 2022, effectively. So That's when the first country started to be like, yeah, this is over. We're done with this nonsense. And the prices declined significantly. So here's a very visual representation of the idea of buy when people are scared, or when there's blood in the streets, and then sell when people are greedy. Okay, well, the thing that started the blood in the streets is really over. And I can't believe they blamed any price depression on Russia. It's like, this happening at the bottom. And this is what we want to be careful of, is that in these chaotic moments in price discovery, we also find that there are large interests, whether they're government or corporate, that kind of go through big shakenings or whatever during this. So some of them will collapse. Which ones they are, we're hard to say. Which currencies will collapse over the next few years? Hard to say as well. You could see it coming with the Turkish lira. You could see it coming with Venezuela, and it's likely there are a bunch more countries that are going to go this way. El Salvador is going to be a fun little one to keep an eye on, but nonetheless, we're in a very chaotic state. So I suspect that we're going to see price discovery over the next few years, especially for Bitcoin, volatile. Well, so to go back to just kind of the closing part of Bitcoin's thesis here, the reason why I'm so interested in Bitcoin specifically is because of this potential as a crisis asset, and more so, we're starting to think about what that means for identity as well, which is one of the reasons why we're going to chat about the apes afterwards. So here again, with this this rising triangle that's taking place again, we usually don't like to use these smaller portions, but I suspect that this is going to be our accumulation trading range here. So there's two things that are going to happen. We're either going to come back down, and we're likely going to come back down a little bit within the next few days, but we could come back down as low as 30. And then again, there is room to believe something crazy could happen, right? Like there's a gap here where if all of a sudden people started firing off nuclear bombs, there's no reason to think Bitcoin can't go back down to 12 grand. But barring that, which again seems unlikely, but also possible, but barring that, I don't suspect we'll go that low. Maybe we could get to 28 or something at the spring, but I suspect what we're actually going to see is a break above the box to around 47,000 is going to get pushed back down into 43. They're going to find out there's barely any supply left, and we're going to jump to $52,000 probably within the next 3 weeks. So that's my current assessment. Let me know what you think in thoughts, questions down below. And remember that if you go to arcanebear.com, what you'll find is, at least in the private group, the Wyckoff trading ranges, and this is the comparison that we have been making for the last few months, that this is actually a reaccumulation zone. So we suspect it's probably something like this, where we're going to see a quick run up to around 60 grand. We'll try to come down and touch that 40 grand if we're lucky. And then I believe we're going to continue. Now, there is another possibility, which is this is what we're seeing here. Kind of this let's actually take a look and compare these two. Yeah, so boom, boom, here we go. Kind of a consistent price degradation, bang, hit kind of a local bottom effectively here. And then do we actually break above the creek now effectively? So if we get above 52,000, that's basically breaking above the creek, and we could see it close to 64, 72, come down to 64, and we're on our way to a few $100,000. And I think what we're going to do this time, much differently than we have in the past, is we're just going to see a slow kind of constant grind upwards in the lower highs, probably for a few years. I think that now people really recognize the importance of sovereign ownership of property or identity. Any of these things is super invaluable, so that's important to keep in mind. Okay, we're going to close off lastly with a quick look at Avalanche. Here, Bear Den Jerry shared something I thought that was super exciting. Not very easy to see in my drawing, so what we're going to do is go to Twitter. Be sure to follow us on Twitter as well. That's where I shared Mr. Bear Den Jerry. This is from our private group. This nice little take on Avalanche. This is another reaccumulation, but this time after a shakeout. So again, remember, we just had an accumulation down near around $10 to $16 in around May. And then now we are up back between this kind of $60 to $140 range. So I think Bear Den Jerry here is right in his assessment. I think we're just about to see that break above the creek, which should put us around $120. And then we're going to... we're going to move into probably 300, let's say $300 to $700 avalanche. It's up quite a big high. But now this actually brings us to one of our private Bear Den members' questions. So we're going to take questions from the audience, but also from the Bear Den group before I wax philosophical about Bored Ape identities. We're going to go over a few of the questions from the private community. So I'm doing that now in the background here. Okay. Question number 1 is from Carl517, and the group says, since you started focusing on play to earn, did you move away from DeFi, or are you still with it? What's your DeFi thesis these days? I'm still incredibly excited about financial technologies in general, whether it's primarily decentralized financial technologies. So yes, DeFi is 100% a core part of our interest. The reason why we've moved into play to earn is it's less contentious. Video games are more fun. You can have a logical, technical argument, and that's not always fun anyway. So in an arena where things are built around playing games, it's quite a bit more enjoyable in terms of front-end thesis. But nonetheless, the reason why we like that is because it is an on-ramp to financial services or decentralized financial services. So ultimately, the only reason why we're excited about play to earn is because of the play to earn for decentralized finance. The idea that people in Venezuela are using RuneScape tokens, which is not a blockchain, but just a video game token, over top of their regular currency because it holds value more tenuously over time, is quite an interesting side thought. So people using Smooth Love Potion in the Philippines, etc. I think these grassroots adoption of decentralized finance is what's most exciting about play to earn. So ultimately, in the core of that, if I were to flush it out, I'd say things like Avalanche, Solana. There's a few other tokens I've seen coming out that are pushing the technological boundaries, like Super Oracle's a layer 1 working on something very similar to Chainlink. How you I forget what it's called. Tip of my head right now, but nonetheless, if we're looking at DeFi, I'm actually more interested in the protocol layer conversation because there's still evolutions out there that might happen. But ultimately, we were big fans of Avalanche, Solana, Luna as well. Zubin brought that one to our table. I think anywhere where you can build a niche community of technology adoption, that's going to be valuable. We've seen that across the world for the last decade. I don't think we'd see it change. Aside from now, it can grow much bigger because you can go beyond those borders, not just with technology, but largely with these decentralized financial plays. So the games and the DeFi are one and the same to me. Okay, next question says, do we expect to see a decrease of Bitcoin dominance with this bull run? Oh, there's a fun question. So what I'm going to do there is pop back over to Bitcoin visual share. Yeah, there we go. So here's the Bitcoin dominance. What do I have to say about this? Okay, my thoughts here are that as time goes forward, Bitcoin is going to become a little bit boring in compared to what a lot of the industry is focusing on. Now, there's a few reasons for that. Primarily, money isn't that interesting of a conversation from a philosophical standpoint to most people. The NFT sector, it's more playful. And you have to remember that if you come to a space that's like, oh, you're buying shitcoin, blah, blah, and people just being rude to you or whatever because you're playing around with some dog coin instead. I think one of the fun parts about these ideas like Bored Apes is that you're bringing more of a cultural identity as well as a space to play for artists and creators too. So it's really interesting to see. It's one of the reasons why we are quite bullish on the whole Bored Ape community, when I really never saw what the potential of this kind of brand or cultural identity really was. It's just something we'd never seen before. It's hard to see how Bitcoin is going to recover all of its glamour because a lot of the productive new things that are happening within this ecosystem that will ultimately lead to even further success for Bitcoin is these new ideas. And these new ideas are creating niches and communities of their own, like the ape coin, effectively, that are going to move a lot of the productive side of the wealth generation into these new assets, Whereas Bitcoin just needs to chug along and maintain this store of value in the central ecosystem as basically a reserve asset for all of the other stable coins, or at least as a part of a basket of how we would manage like a treasury of stable coins. I think this idea of decentralized finance says no, that Bitcoin's dominance actually probably stays lower and lower each time, as the wealth generation side of an ecosystem is so important for the money. Not just which money do we use, but what do we do to generate wealth? And now you're in a space where a content creator with 100 million subscribers could start their own token and use just that token, and you're going to see this amazing productive feedback loop for every participant that you just do not get with the traditional financial system. So ultimately, I don't think that Bitcoin's dominance is going to recover. I think it's going to grow part and parcel of the growth of this ecosystem effectively. So fun question there. Okay, let's take a look here. We got one more question in the private group I saw. Okay, does the inflation rate of Avalanche concern you in any way, the total of Avalanche being released in the coming years? So this is, I haven't looked into this conversation. I think there's some people that are having it. I'm going to tell you what I think I know about Avalanche, and we'll start from there, and then hopefully that will make sense. So from what I understand, Avalanche's fixed supply is at 720 million. For Ethereum, we don't know what that is. Now, the other thing I think is that they have a release schedule. With proof of stake, you're dealing with a few ideas, right? You want to build a community. You want to distribute the tokens as evenly to the community so the voting potential is in the hands of the people that are smart enough to be making those decisions. So there's a few ways you want to kind of place this. But from what I understand, Avalanche already has in a built-in burning mechanism. So Avalanche is already burning Avalanche. So the max supply is actually decreasing. But the total supply, or sorry, up here, the circulating supply is at 267 million. So obviously not that whole max supply. So over the next few years, I do believe there is a distribution cycle or a release schedule to get to the max supply. So that in the first few years of Avalanche, due to the need for inflation through, again, the general idea of kind of generating wealth, like how do we allocate funds to new places? How do we incentivize other people to join the ecosystem? Like you want to make sure that if you're growing a company, you have enough share and options in your company so that you can offer your employees incentive to participate. And this has always been kind of a hallmark of a good company. So what you're seeing here, I believe, is over the next few years, a distribution of the tokens that have been locked. And I don't know how exactly that functions. I believe it's through a release schedule in Avalanche staking, which is how you get a node, which is also how you're rewarded. So you'd have to look deeper into that, but I do believe that's the case. So maybe there's something I missed in the conversation, but we have a pretty good tech team, and I followed that one pretty closely because I'm very excited about Avalanche. So I think people are wrong in maybe the assumptions that they've made to come to a conclusion that doesn't fit the technology that I understand and the way I've understood it today. So that's how I'm going to answer that, because I haven't seen the other part of the argument. So I'm not going to try to argue against that. I'm just going to tell you how I think it is. And then we'll go from there. Okay. I see one or two quick questions in the live chat stream as well, so I'll pick and choose from those. Sweet Shirt G. Yeah, I know. The Rick and Morty Hawaiian shirt, that was a great score. A good birthday weekend. Okay, here we go. Sweet being back. Yeah, thank you guys. It's good to be back. I look forward to doing it's not, I always try to tell myself I'm going to do more videos or something, and it's almost impossible. I still keep making videos, which is a damn good thing, but making more than what I've been doing for the last few years seems basically impossible. I show up randomly. We keep repeating the same thesis now. It's, we're going to show up, we're going to tell you the same thing. Hey guys, we believe this is an accumulation. We think that accumulating good assets, especially crisis investing assets, is a hugely important thing to doing, especially when we can see that there's likely more crisis ahead. So anyways, okay, so into the question stream from the live chat. Shout out to you with greetings from Netherlands. I thought it was a video, but it's not. It's a live. I'm so stoked. Great. Let's see if it is ETH to BTC charts have answers? Yes, great question. I think in the future that it will have more and more relevance, but today less so. Can you look at Polis, please? Yeah, I have a general sentiment about the gaming sector. We've seen about an 80 to 90% recoil in almost everything. I think that was the first local bottom or a PSY phase ST or PSY phase of the accumulation channel. So it's got some time. You've got some time to accumulate before things take off, although assets like Avalanche look primed. So others, like actually Axie performed probably its first top of the ST in its trading range as well. If you're doing your homework, you know what I'm talking about. Hello, friend. Headed back to Costa Rica, selling everything in the USA. I don't like, right, that's awesome. So that sounds like a good choice in my mind. Awesome, thanks for the compliments there, Alan. Okay, well, we're just going to leave it at that today. I don't want to keep these too long. Just figure we'd do a quick hello. Let's deal with the Arcane Bear. Hope you guys are enjoying the ride. Yeah, general accumulation. That's the answer to where I believe we are right now, barring any crazy cataclysmic event, in which case just buy like a goddamn madman when you can then. Just take out loans against everything you have. No, don't do that. This is never financial advice. Don't do anything stupid. Or if you are going to do stupid, do it on your own volition. You're signing your own waivers when you do that. Let's deal with the Arcane Bear. Thank you for playing along. Oh, yes, actually, here. My Bored Ape little wax. Okay. I was not sold on the apes until I listened to Yat and Maria speak at the Ape DAO. Now, one of the things that I think is fascinating, I wrote a little thread on this the other day, was about cultural identity. And cultural identities have been around for a really long time, and they're very valuable. They have a way of allowing us to recognize like-minded people from a visual perspective. So different religions have different hats. So another great way to look at it. And I think the hats are kind of irrelevant. I think the hats of each religion are irrelevant. But what's important is cultural identity. It's important to the people of that culture that are also interested in that identity. Now, let's just take away culture. And this is where I was bored about the topic for quite a long time, when I was thinking about identity from a government perspective, like, oh, here's your name and birth date, and this I don't like about our society today effectively is the malfeasance in the people that are in control of this ecosystem, which is so clearly not in favor of the average person. So because of that, identity to me was rather boring and almost kind of a scary topic. Yet this new kind of birthplace of sovereign identity potentially is really exciting. There's a whole bunch of unique things that could take place in the world of sovereign identity that has the ability for you to prove that you are you without us needing to know that you were born from which country or what time. Now, I don't know what that looks like in the future, but part of what I find interesting is how technology replaces the corrupt aspects of what we've seen in the past. Now, when you're dealing with a technology that largely brings transparency to the table, this is a great kind of anti-corruption technology because it says, hey, you have to be transparent. And that's been one of the positive draws. It's some of the negative side effects too. People are like, oh, there's no Monero. We could easily draw some dystopian view about what identity controlled by like a central source looks like under this very tightly knit, uncensored position. Like, what if only one person can censor the rest of it that's uncensorable kind of idea, right? And so ultimately, after I spent a bunch of hours thinking about, the kind of travesties of identity from a governmental level, I started to think about the upsides of identity from a cultural level or from a personal perspective. Some people like wearing particular types of clothes, driving particular types of cars, and they identify themselves in their class or cultural group by those things that they identify with. Now, what's unique here is, again, the DAO. There was never really a way to draw collective rewards for a brand identity, not in the past. This particular sector, which is, again, one of the reasons why it's so exciting, is the asymmetric opportunity of people who are participating in the hopeful potential network effect of something are rewarded early on for doing so. if you are able to participate in the growth of Facebook or Instagram, you would probably getting a pretty decent check size just for being a regular user and member, but they never included that. Here, I think the kind of backbone of open source collaborative technologies is to lend some of the credence of how this sector has grown. It's, I guess, almost in its nature back to the people that are using it. And I was not a Bored Ape identifier for a while, but I'm definitely a Bored Ape. I mean, I was laying outside on my pineapple in the pool. It feels like a Bored Ape thing to do. But the depth of the value is coming from the ideas, okay, well, we have a plausible brand that's selling X amount of dollars every month. We can produce this by giving back to the membership. And we've seen lots of companies do this. Now, the Prime Amazon membership was it's kind of similar. It's a little bit of a different month-over-month cost, but in aggregate, these things are not cheap anyways. Netflix might only cost you $12 a month, but how many hours does it cost you? And if it does cost you $12 a month, for how many years have you been paying for Netflix? Systematically, if you keep paying into different, I guess, mechanisms of entertainment, the reward system that you can align in these DAO infrastructures is direct peer-to-peer rewards as well. So you remove a lot of the kind of infiltration of the middleman's regulation by providing direct rewards for participating. And these are really interesting conversations and always at the kind of cutting edge of regulation and what identity even means. I think is kind of society's having an identity crisis lately. You can see some of its scuffed makeup. So in such an interesting age around these conversations, that's it. I'm a big fan of the Bored Ape. I'm a big fan of the Mutant Apes. I think this shift of kind of a cultural identity and I guess just any identity that's not government controlled, I was pretty excited about. So I'm also excited and what do you call it? I'm very excited about looking at identity differently because I had always seen it from a pretty harsh perspective of a government standard. And here, you can jump on Twitter and you can see verified profiles based off of this kind of community culture, and that's a big tick mark, even though they may not have a badge beside them. I think that there's a level of value to understanding your kind of community and culture. And even though you can just buy your way into the culture, which you can do in almost every class, you can pretty much buy your way into it if you've got enough capital. Like people are like, oh, okay, we'll move over for this guy too, I guess. Like it's another. Anyways, very excited about that. We'll do some more. We're going to jump back and forth. I know if you guys haven't yet, go watch the podcast I did with Robbie Young from Animoca Brands. Very, very well spoken, very well thought out individual. Had a great time chatting with him as well. We're going to be continuing to make content for years to come. On what days and how many of those days is going to happen each year, I'm not entirely sure, but we're going to keep showing up. Thanks for letting me I took almost a whole week off again after my birthday. It's just like, that's it. I'm feeling lazy. It's almost one of those times the first time you stop, you're like, I'm not coming back for a bit. I was going to keep taking time off. Anyways, thank you guys. We'll see you again very, very shortly here. Steve with the Arcane Bear. Thoughts, questions, comments, likes, clicks, subscribes, all those fun things. You know how to play this game. We'll see you again on the next episode. Oh, wait, on the other side. We'll see you again on the other side. Wait, there we go.